On the morning of April 10, 1912, thousands of people gathered at the docks of Southampton, England. Some came to board a ship. Others came only to watch. Standing before them was something the world had never seen before. A ship so enormous that it seemed to stretch beyond the horizon. Its four towering funnels rose high above the harbor. Its black hull reflected across the calm water. Even from a distance, the vessel looked less like a ship and more like a floating city. Her name was Titanic. Before she ever sailed, people were already calling her the greatest ship ever built. But Titanic was more than a symbol of engineering. She was a symbol of ambition. At the beginning of the 20th century, the world's largest shipping companies were locked in fierce competition. Every new ship had to be bigger, faster, more luxurious than the last. For the White Star Line, building Titanic was about proving one thing: that they could create the finest passenger ship on Earth. Construction began in Belfast, Ireland. Thousands of workers spent more than 2 years assembling millions of steel rivets by hand. The ship measured nearly 270 meters in length. She stood taller than most buildings of her time. Inside, everything was designed to impress. The grand staircase shimmered beneath elegant glass. Crystal chandeliers lit the dining rooms. Rich wood paneling covered the walls. First-class passengers enjoyed private suites, luxurious restaurants, swimming pools, Turkish baths, a gymnasium, and even an electric elevator. For many wealthy travelers, it felt more like a luxury hotel than a ship crossing the Atlantic. But Titanic carried more than the rich. Second-class passengers enjoyed comfort that many people had never experienced before. Families traveling to America found clean cabins, good food, and modern facilities. Then there was third class. Hundreds of immigrants boarded with dreams far greater than their luggage. They came from Ireland, Sweden, Norway, Italy, Eastern Europe, and many other places. Some hoped to escape poverty. Others dreamed of finding work. Many believed America offered a new beginning. For them, Titanic was more than transportation. It was hope. By the time the ship prepared to leave Southampton, more than 2,000 people stood aboard. Businessmen, musicians, engineers, doctors, crew members, children, entire families. Each carried different dreams. None imagined they were about to become part of history. As Titanic slowly pulled away from the dock, crowds waved from the shoreline. Passengers smiled from the decks. The massive ship moved with surprising grace. Its engines echoed across the harbor. The journey had begun. Newspapers praised Titanic as a triumph of modern engineering. Many described her as the safest ship ever built. One reason for that confidence was her advanced design. The ship contained 16 watertight compartments. Engineers believed that even if several compartments flooded, Titanic would remain afloat. This remarkable feature inspired enormous public confidence. Over time, that confidence gave birth to a famous phrase. People began saying, "The ship was unsinkable." Interestingly, the company itself did not officially advertise Titanic as unsinkable, but public excitement and newspaper reports helped spread that belief around the world. Confidence became certainty, and certainty became legend. Yet history has a habit of reminding us That no machine, no matter how advanced, is ever beyond the reach of nature. As Titanic entered the open Atlantic, the sea was calm. The sky was clear. Passengers laughed. Children played along the decks. Musicians performed cheerful melodies. Everything appeared perfect. But hundreds of miles ahead, floating silently in the darkness, an enormous iceberg drifted south. No one aboard Titanic knew it yet. But their paths were already destined to cross. For the first 3 days, everything went exactly as planned. Titanic sailed across the Atlantic with remarkable confidence. The sea remained calm. The engines ran smoothly. Passengers enjoyed every moment of the journey. In first class, elegant dinners filled the evenings. Crystal glasses reflected the warm light of the dining room. Laughter echoed through luxurious halls. Some passengers danced late into the night. Others gathered in smoking rooms, discussing business, politics, or their future in America. On the lower decks, children chased one another through narrow corridors. Families shared simple meals. Musicians entertained travelers with cheerful melodies. For thousands of people, the voyage felt peaceful, almost perfect. But hundreds of miles ahead, the North Atlantic was hiding a silent danger. Every spring, large icebergs drifted south from Greenland. Some floated just above the surface. Others stretched deep beneath the ocean. Beautiful from a distance, but deadly for any ship that came too close. Throughout April 14, other ships in the region began sending wireless messages. They warned of heavy ice. One report described large icebergs directly along Titanic's route. Another warned of floating ice fields. More warnings followed throughout the afternoon and evening. The wireless operators aboard Titanic received many of these messages. Some were delivered to the bridge. Others were delayed as the operators became busy sending personal telegrams for passengers. Communication aboard the ship never completely stopped. But not every warning received the same level of attention. Meanwhile, Captain Edward Smith continued toward New York. He was one of the most experienced captains in the White Star Line. After decades at sea, this voyage was expected to be one of his final commands before retirement. Nothing suggested disaster was only hours away. Night slowly covered the Atlantic. The ocean became unusually calm. There were almost no waves. To most passengers, the still water looked beautiful. But to experienced sailors, it created a dangerous problem. Normally, waves breaking against an iceberg made it easier to spot. Tonight, the sea was like glass. The ice blended into the darkness. High above the deck, inside the crow's nest, two lookouts watched the horizon. Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee. The air was freezing. The sky was clear. Thousands of stars filled the night. But there was no moon. Without moonlight, the ocean ahead was almost completely black. The lookouts searched carefully. Minute after minute. Nothing. Then, at approximately 11:40 p.m., Frederick Fleet suddenly froze. Directly ahead, a dark shape appeared against the stars. It grew larger. Fast. He rang the warning bell 3 times. Then reached for the telephone. Iceberg, right ahead. The message reached the bridge instantly. First Officer William Murdoch reacted without hesitation. He ordered the helm hard as starboard at the same time. He ordered the engines reversed. The crew responded immediately. The massive ship began turning. Slowly. Painfully slowly. Titanic was over 260 meters long. More than 50,000 tons of steel could not change direction in an instant. For a brief moment, it looked as though the ship might clear the iceberg. Passengers barely noticed anything unusual. Some only felt a gentle vibration beneath their feet. Then, a long scraping sound echoed along the starboard side. Ice crashed onto the forward decks. The iceberg disappeared into the darkness behind them. Inside, everything seemed strangely quiet. There was no giant explosion. No violent impact. No panic. Many passengers continued talking, reading, or sleeping. Some even joked that the ship had simply lost a propeller. But below the waterline, where no one could see, the iceberg had torn open several sections of Titanic's hull. Cold Atlantic water rushed inside. Compartment after compartment began filling. Engineers hurried below deck. Within minutes, the first reports reached the bridge. The damage was far worse than anyone had imagined. Titanic had survived the collision, but she had received a wound that no ship of her time could survive. And for the first time, Captain Smith heard words he never expected to hear. The collision lasted only a few seconds. But below the surface, the damage was already spreading. Freezing Atlantic water rushed into the forward compartments. At first, it seemed manageable. Crew members inspected the lower decks with lanterns in their hands. Some saw only a small stream of water. Others watched in horror as entire rooms filled within minutes. The sea was entering faster than anyone could stop it. The ship's chief designer, Thomas Andrews, moved quickly through the damaged sections. He examined every flooded compartment, measured the rising water, studied the ship's condition. When he returned to the bridge, his face had changed. There was no panic, only certainty. He quietly told Captain Edward Smith the truth. 5 watertight compartments had been breached. Titanic had been designed to stay afloat if 4 compartments flooded, not 5. The extra weight at the bow would pull the ship lower and lower. Water would spill over the tops of the compartments, one after another, like water flowing from one glass into the next. It could not be stopped. Captain Smith stood in silence. For decades, he had commanded ships across dangerous oceans. He had survived storms, dense fog, and countless voyages. But nothing had prepared him for these words. Titanic would sink. The captain looked toward the calm Atlantic night. The sea outside remained peaceful. The stars reflected across the water. Everything appeared beautiful. Yet beneath that calm surface, time was running out. Thomas Andrews estimated they had less than 3 hours. Maybe less. Captain Smith gave the order no captain ever wanted to give. Prepare the lifeboats. Crew members hurried across the decks. Passengers looked on with curiosity. Some laughed. Others asked if it was only a precaution. After all, the ship felt perfectly stable. There was no loud alarm, no violent shaking, no sign of panic. Few believed there was any real danger. Then another terrible reality emerged. Titanic carried more than 2,000 people. But there were lifeboats for only about half that number. The shortage was not illegal at the time. Maritime regulations were outdated and based on a ship's size categories, not the total number of people on board. Even so, the result was devastating. There would never be enough room for everyone. The order spread across the decks. Women and children first. Some families obeyed immediately. Others refused to leave. Many husbands told their wives they would board a later boat. Some mothers hesitated. The giant ship still looked perfectly safe. Why climb into a small wooden boat floating in the freezing darkness? Crew members pleaded with passengers to move quickly. But confusion slowed everything. The first lifeboat was lowered. Only partially full. There was space for many more people. Yet fear, uncertainty, and disbelief kept seats empty. Several passengers simply watched from the railings, convinced the danger had been exaggerated. Meanwhile, far below deck, engineers continued fighting to keep the lights on. Boilers roared. Steam filled the engine rooms. Water rose around their feet. They knew exactly what was happening. Yet they remained at their posts. Every extra minute of electricity meant more time to launch lifeboats. More time for families to escape. Above them, the ship's orchestra gathered on deck. Without being ordered, they began to play. Soft music drifted into the cold night air. The melodies calmed frightened passengers. For a few moments, it almost felt like an ordinary evening. But the boat continued sinking. Almost too slowly to notice. Almost. Crew members now realized the truth could no longer be hidden. The impossible was happening. The ship that many believed could never sink was slowly disappearing beneath the Atlantic Ocean. And with every passing minute, the chances of survival grew smaller. The Atlantic remained strangely calm. The stars still filled the night sky. But aboard Titanic, everything had changed. The boat continued sinking deeper into the freezing ocean. Passengers who had ignored the first warnings now understood the terrible truth. This was no drill. This was no precaution. The ship was dying. Crew members rushed from one lifeboat to another. Their voices echoed across the decks. Women and children first, families embraced one another. Some husbands helped their wives into the boats, promising they would meet again in New York. Neither of them knew those would be their final words. Not every goodbye came with tears. Some came with hope. Hope that the ship would somehow stay afloat. Hope that another rescue ship would arrive in time. Hope that tomorrow would still come. But time was running out. Far below the decks, the engineers refused to leave their posts. Water poured into the boiler rooms. Steam hissed through broken pipes. The temperature dropped as the icy Atlantic swallowed more of the ship. The men knew they had almost no chance of survival. Yet they kept the generators running. Every light that stayed on. Every minute the wireless radio continued working. Gave someone else another chance to live. Their sacrifice would save countless lives. On the upper decks, the ship's band continued playing. No one can say exactly which song was played last. Different survivors remembered different melodies. But they all remembered one thing. The music never stopped. It offered calm. In the middle of unimaginable fear. As the boat disappeared beneath the sea, the stern slowly lifted into the air. For the first time, passengers could feel the steep angle beneath their feet. Furniture slid across the floors. Loose luggage crashed through hallways. People struggled to keep their balance. Some climbed toward the stern, searching desperately for higher ground. Others remained trapped below. Locked doors, flooded corridors, and rising water blocked every escape. Inside the ship, darkness spread through the lower decks. The roar of rushing water became louder. Every compartment surrendered to the ocean. Then, just after 2 a.m., the impossible happened. The enormous stress placed on Titanic's hull became too great. The ship broke apart. The bow separated first, pulling thousands of tons of steel toward the ocean floor. For a few terrifying moments, the stern remained above the water, standing almost upright against the night sky. Those still holding onto the deck had nowhere left to run. Gravity took over. People slipped into the freezing Atlantic below. Moments later, the stern disappeared beneath the surface. At 2:20 a.m., Titanic was gone. The largest passenger ship in the world had vanished beneath the Atlantic Ocean. But the nightmare was far from over. More than 1,000 people were now floating in water close to -2 degrees Celsius. The cold was merciless. Within minutes, hands became numb. Breathing grew difficult. Voices cried out across the darkness. Some called for loved ones. Others begged for help. The lifeboats drifted nearby. Many passengers wanted to return, but their crews feared that if too many desperate people climbed aboard, the boats themselves would sink. It was one of the most heartbreaking decisions of the night. Gradually, the voices became fewer. One by one, they disappeared. Then, a silence settled over the Atlantic. A silence so complete that survivors would remember it for the rest of their lives. Where only minutes before there had been music, laughter, and the sounds of a great ship crossing the ocean, there was now only darkness, cold water, and hundreds of empty life jackets floating beneath the stars. The unsinkable ship had become history. At 2:20 in the morning, the Titanic was gone. The ocean that had carried the world's greatest ship now hid it beneath more than 3,000 meters of water. But the story was far from over. Far away in the darkness, a small passenger ship named RMS Carpathia raced through fields of ice. Just hours earlier, its wireless operator had received Titanic's desperate distress calls. Captain Arthur Rostron made an extraordinary decision. He ordered every possible ounce of speed from his ship. Extra lookouts were posted. Hot drinks were prepared. Blankets were gathered. Doctors stood ready. Every minute mattered. The crew knew they were racing against time. As dawn approached, Carpathia reached the disaster site. What they found was almost impossible to comprehend. The great ship had vanished. Only lifeboats remained, scattered across the icy Atlantic. One by one, the survivors were lifted aboard. Many were exhausted. Some were injured. Others sat in complete silence, unable to understand what had happened. Out of more than 2,200 people on board, only about 700 survived. More than 1,500 men, women, and children lost their lives. It remains one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in history. For families waiting in New York, the uncertainty was heartbreaking. Crowds gathered at the harbor, searching every arriving face. Some found loved ones. Many did not. The world was stunned. Newspapers across the globe carried the story on their front pages. How could the largest and most advanced passenger ship ever built disappear on its very first voyage? Investigations began almost immediately. British and American inquiries examined every decision made that night. The findings revealed a series of failures. Too few lifeboats. Ice warnings that were not fully acted upon. Outdated safety regulations. And overconfidence in technology. The disaster changed maritime history forever. New international rules required enough lifeboats for everyone on board. Continuous radio watches became mandatory. An international ice patrol was established to monitor dangerous icebergs in the North Atlantic. Ships around the world adopted stricter emergency procedures. The lessons of Titanic were written into global maritime law. For decades, the wreck itself remained hidden. No one knew its exact location. Some believed it might never be found. Then, in 1985, after years of searching, an international expedition led by oceanographer Dr. Robert Ballard discovered the wreck nearly 3,800 meters below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. The images shocked the world. The bow rested on the ocean floor. The stern lay broken some distance away, exactly as survivors had described decades earlier. Rust covered the steel. Railings had collapsed. Rooms that once echoed with music now rested in complete darkness. Personal belongings remained scattered across the seabed. Shoes, suitcases, dishes. Silent reminders that every object once belonged to a real person. With dreams, families, and a future that never arrived. Today, more than a century has passed since Titanic sailed from Southampton. Yet people continue to tell its story. Books have been written. Museums have preserved its history. Scientists continue studying the wreck. Filmmakers have brought its final hours to life for new generations. But Titanic is remembered for more than its size, or its luxury, or even its tragedy. It is remembered because it revealed something timeless about humanity. Courage in the face of fear. Sacrifice in the face of danger. Hope in the darkest hours. And the reminder that no matter how advanced our technology becomes, nature always deserves our respect. The Titanic was called unsinkable. History proved otherwise. Its steel may now rest beneath the Atlantic Ocean. But its story continues to sail across generations. Not as a tale of failure, but as a lesson in humility, responsibility, and the extraordinary strength of the human spirit. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy original documentaries that explore the moments which changed history, subscribe for more true stories from the past. And tell us in the comments. If you had been aboard Titanic that night, what do you think you would have done? Because sometimes, the greatest stories in history are not about ships. They are about the people who sailed on them.